The dust hadn't settled from the last stagecoach when he walked through the swinging doors of the Copper Flame Saloon. Wyoming Territory, 1882, a place where men came to disappear and women came to survive. The stranger moved with the deliberate slowness of a man who'd learned that sudden movements got you killed. Cole Maddox was a name he'd taken 3 towns back, borrowed from a tombstone in Kansas. The scar running from his left eye to his jaw told its own story, one he never shared. His duster coat, once black, had faded to the color of old smoke, and beneath it, the Colt .45 rested against his hip like a faithful dog. The Copper Flame wasn't the biggest saloon in Cheyenne, but it was the cleanest. Fresh sawdust covered the floor, and the brass fixtures actually shined. Behind the bar, bottles stood in neat rows like soldiers, and the mirror imported from Chicago reflected the late afternoon sun streaming through windows that someone had bothered to wash. That someone was Lillian Crow. She stood at the far end of the bar, counting the day's receipts with the focused intensity of a banker. Her auburn hair, pinned up in a style too refined for this dusty corner of creation, caught the light like burnished copper. The black silk dress she wore was modest by saloon standards, but still drew every eye in the room. Not because of what it revealed, but because of how she wore it like armor. Cole had heard the whispers in the boarding house, at the general store, from the boy who'd taken his horse at the livery. The widow Crow, the saloon queen, the woman who'd buried her husband 6 months back and kept his business running despite every prediction to the contrary. Some said she'd poisoned him. Others claimed he'd died in a knife fight over cards. The truth, as it often did in the territories, remained buried. "Whiskey," Cole said, settling onto a stool that groaned under his weight. His voice came out rough, like words dragged over gravel. Lillian looked up from her ledger, and their eyes met in the mirror behind the bar. Hers were green, not the soft green of spring grass, but the hard green of jade. She studied him for a moment, taking in the trail dust, the worn boots, the way his hand rested near but not on his gun. "2 bits, she said, reaching for a bottle without looking away. "3 if you want the good stuff." "2's fine," she poured with practiced ease, the amber liquid catching the light as it filled the glass. When she slid it across the bar, their fingers nearly touched. Nearly. Cole wrapped his hand around the glass, but didn't drink. Instead, he watched her in the mirror as she returned to her numbers. The other patrons, cowboys, merchants. A traveling dentist with whiskey-steady hands gave her a wide berth. Respect or fear? Cole couldn't tell. Maybe both. "You planning to drink that or admire it?" Lillian asked without looking up. Man can do both. That earned him a glance, sharp and measuring. "Most men who come in here are running from something or running to something. Which are you?" Cole took a sip, letting the burn travel down his throat before answering. "Maybe I'm just thirsty." "Nobody's just anything out here." She closed the ledger with a snap that echoed in the afternoon quiet. "You got a name? Or should I call you Dusty?" "Cole Maddox." "That your real name? Real enough?" A smile played at the corner of her mouth, not quite forming, but threatening too. "Well, mister, real enough. You picked an interesting day to blow into town. We're expecting trouble." Cole's eyes flicked to the windows, cataloging exits and obstacles with the efficiency of long practice. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that rides in groups and takes what it wants." She moved down the bar, wiping spots that were already clean. The stray irons. Heard of them. He had raiders out of Montana Territory, led by a man named Dutch Garrison, who collected scalps and protection money with equal enthusiasm. They'd hit 3 towns along the railroad line in as many months. Thought the marshal would handle that sort of thing. Cole said. Lillian's laugh was bitter as black coffee. "Marshal Hendricks lit out 2 days ago. Family emergency back east," he said. "Funny how those emerge right when Dutch Garrison's crew gets close. And you're still open for business. A woman's got to eat." She poured herself a small measure of whiskey, the good stuff. Cole noticed and raised it in a mock toast. Besides, I've faced down worse than a bunch of Montana thugs. Cole doubted that, but he kept his opinion to himself. He'd seen what the stray irons left behind in Billings burned buildings and bodies twisted into positions that suggested their last moments had been educational in all the wrong ways. The saloon began filling as evening approached. Cowboys fresh from the range, their spurs singing against the floorboards. Shopkeepers seeking liquid courage after long days of measuring out lives in yards of cloth and pounds of flour. A piano player missing 2 fingers on his left hand coaxed melodies from an instrument that hadn't been tuned since the war. Through it all, Lillian moved with quiet efficiency. She knew every man's drink, every man's limit, every man's trouble. When voices rose, a look from her settled them down. When hands wandered where they shouldn't, she redirected them with words sharp enough to draw blood. Cole nursed his whiskey and watched. Not the way the other men watched with hunger or speculation, but the way a man counts bullets before a fight. He noticed how she kept a shotgun within easy reach behind the bar, how she positioned herself to see both the door and the mirror, how her smile never quite reached those jade-hard eyes. As full dark settled over Cheyenne, a commotion erupted near the piano. 2 cowboys' boys, really, probably not past 20, squared off over a perceived slight involving a dropped coin and a questioned heritage. Before Cole could decide whether to intervene, Lillian was there. "Gentlemen," she said, and the word carried enough ice to freeze whiskey. "You want to kill each other. You do it outside. You want a drink. You do it peaceful. Choose." The younger of the 2 face flushed with whiskey, and wounded pride made the mistake of reaching for his gun. He'd cleared leather maybe 2 inches before Lillian's derringer appeared in her hand, steady as stone. That would be the wrong choice. "Tommy Morrison," she said softly. "Your mother writes me letters, asks me to look after you. How do you think she'd feel if I had to write back explaining how her boy died over a penny?" The silence in the saloon was complete. Even the piano player had frozen, his remaining fingers hovering over the keys. Tommy's hand trembled on his gun butt, caught between boy's pride and man's wisdom. "Smart boy," Lillian said when he let his hand fall. "Next round's on the house. For both of you, outside. Shake hands like your fathers taught you, then come back and drink like friends." The crisis passed. Conversation resumed, and Lillian's derringer disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. She moved back behind the bar, poured the promised drinks, and returned to her ledger as if nothing had happened. Cole finished his whiskey and set the glass down carefully. When Lillian came to collect it, he met her eyes directly for the first time. "That was well done," he said. "Part of the job." But something in her expression shifted. Recognizing that his approval was different from the usual flattery she deflected nightly. "You planning to stay in town long, Mr. Maddox?" "It depends." "On—" Cole glanced toward the door, then back to her. "On how interesting things get." She refilled his glass without being asked the good stuff this time. "Then you might be staying a while. Things are about to get very interesting indeed." As if summoned by her words. The saloon doors swung open. 3 men entered, trail-dirty and hard-faced, wearing dusters despite the warm evening. They spread out immediately, one to each side. One down the middle in a formation Cole recognized from too many dusty towns and bloody endings. The stray irons had come to Cheyenne, the morning after the stray irons visit. Lillian found herself polishing glasses that didn't need polishing, her mind replaying the previous night's encounter. The 3 men had drunk their whiskey, made their threats veiled in pleasant conversation, and left with promises to return. She'd smiled through it all, even as her finger rested on the trigger of the shotgun beneath the bar. Now, in the gray light of dawn, she allowed herself the luxury of worry. The saloon was empty save for old Pete, the swamper who'd been cleaning the Copper Flame since before her husband bought it. He moved his mop in slow circles, humming a tune from the war, though which side he'd fought for. He never said, "That stranger still in town?" Pete asked without looking up. "Which stranger?" Lillian replied, though she knew exactly who he meant. In a town like Cheyenne, men like Cole Maddox didn't go unnoticed. "The one with eyes like winter. Heard he took a room at Ma Dudley's boarding house." Lillian set down the glass carefully. "Since when do you gossip, Pete?" "Since men like that started showing interest in folks I care about." He stopped mopping, fixed her with rheumy eyes that saw more than most gave him credit for. "Seen his type before. They bring trouble like dogs bring fleas." "We've already got trouble." "Different kind. Dutch garrison wants money. Men like that stranger want something else entire." Before Lillian could respond, the saloon doors opened. She expected early morning drunks or cowboys needing hair of the dog. Instead, Cole Maddox stepped in, looking like he'd been up for hours. His clothes were different cleaner, though still dark, and he'd shaved, revealing a jaw sharp enough to cut glass. "We're closed," Lillian said automatically. "I know." He moved to the bar with that same careful grace, like a mountain cat picking its way across uncertain ground. "Came to talk, not drink." Pete muttered something about checking the storeroom and disappeared, leaving them alone in the morning quiet. "Talk about what?" Lillian kept her voice neutral, though her pulse quickened. In daylight, without whiskey and smoke between them, he seemed both less and more dangerous. "About why you're not packing up like any sensible woman would." "Maybe I'm not sensible. Maybe." He leaned against the bar, not quite sitting. "Or maybe you've got nowhere else to go." The accuracy of it stung. Lillian turned away, busying herself with unnecessary tasks. "You seem mighty interested in my business for a man just passing through." "Who said I was passing through?" She faced him then, chin raised. "Men like you are always passing through. It's what you do. Drift in, stir things up, drift out. Leave the rest of us to clean up the mess." "You don't know what kind of man I am." "Don't I?" Lillian stepped closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Let me guess. Former soldier cavalry by the way you sit a horse. Fought in the war. Probably for the Union given your accent. Did things that keep you up at night. Lost someone, wife, maybe, or a brother. Now you drift from town to town, hiring out your gun, telling yourself you're helping folks when really you're just running from ghosts." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in the air between them. "That's quite a story." "Am I wrong?" "About the cavalry." He pulled out a chair. Sat down properly this time. "I was infantry, 14th Illinois. But the rest." Cole was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old pain. "Her name was Sarah. Typhoid took her while I was fighting rebels in Tennessee. Came home to a grave and a house that didn't feel like home anymore." Lillian softened despite herself. She knew about houses that didn't feel like home. "I'm sorry." It was a long time ago, but the way he said it suggested time hadn't dulled the edge much. "Your turn." "My turn. You pegged me pretty good. Only fair I get a shot." Lillian poured herself coffee from the pot. Pete always left warming, buying time. "Not much to tell." "Try me." She sipped the bitter brew, considering something about the morning quiet, about the way he waited without pushing, made her want to talk. "You ever been to St. Louis?" "Once or twice. I sang in a music hall there. The Golden Note. Wasn't a bad life, decent pay. Appreciative audiences." She smiled wryly. "Appreciative men. More like—" One was especially appreciative. Marcus Bellwood. Owned half the riverfront. Wanted to own me too. But you had other ideas." "I was young. Thought his attention meant something it didn't." Her fingers traced patterns on the bar top. "When I finally understood what kind of arrangement he had in mind, I tried to leave. He objected." Cole's eyes darkened. "How strongly?" "Strong enough that I still can't wear my hair up on the left side." She touched the spot unconsciously. where hair grew differently over an old scar. But I got away, took what money I could, headed west, figured no one would look for a St. Louis singer in Wyoming territory. And your husband, Frank, Lillian's laugh was humorless. Frank Crow was a convenience. He needed a pretty face to bring customers to his saloon. I needed a new name and a safe place to land. We understood each other. But you didn't love him. It wasn't a question. Lillian met his eyes steadily. Frank wasn't a man who inspired love, but he wasn't cruel, and he kept his end of our bargain. When he died. You kept the saloon. What else was I going to do? This is what I know now. Serving drinks, keeping peace, making sure everyone goes home with most of their blood still inside them. She gestured at the empty room. It's not the golden note, but it's mine. Even with Dutch Garrison breathing down your neck. Especially then, her jaw set stubbornly. I've run once before, not doing it again. Cole studied her for a long moment. You know what they did in Billings? I heard stories. Stories don't cover it. I was there. His voice went flat, emotionless in the way of men describing horrors. They burned the saloon with the owner inside, made his wife watch. Then well, she didn't survive what came next. Lillian's hand found the bar for support, but her voice stayed steady. You trying to scare me? I'm trying to prepare you. Dutch Garrison doesn't make idle threats. Neither do I. She straightened, drawing on reserves of strength that had gotten her from St. Louis to Wyoming. I've got friends in this town, good people who'll disappear like your marshal when push comes to shove. Cole leaned forward. You saw them last night, cowboys and shopkeepers, not fighters. And you are. When I need to be. The words hung between them, an offer wrapped in a statement. Lillian felt something shift in her chest, hope or fear. She couldn't tell which. Why? She asked quietly. Why do you care what happens to me or my saloon? Cole stood, settled his hat on his head. Maybe I'm tired of seeing bad things happen to good people. Maybe I've got nowhere else to be. Or maybe... He paused at the door, glanced back. Maybe I just like your whiskey. After he left, Lillian stood in the empty saloon, morning light streaming through windows that might soon be broken. She thought about St. Louis, about Frank, about all the times she'd had to be harder than she wanted to be. Then she checked the loads in her shotgun, made sure the Derringer was where it should be, and opened for business. Whatever came next, she'd face it standing. The storm hit Cheyenne 3 nights later, turning the streets to mud and driving honest folks indoors. Lillian had just finished counting the evening's meager takings when she heard the scrape of boots on the back steps, followed by a thud that sounded too much like a body hitting wood. She grabbed the shotgun from beneath the bar, moving through the empty saloon with practiced quiet. The rain hammered on the roof, masking her footsteps as she approached the back door. Through the gap beneath it, she could see a shadow sprawled across the landing. "Don't shoot!" came a voice, rough with pain. "It's Cole." Lillian lowered the gun, but didn't set it aside. She'd learned long ago that wounded animals were the most dangerous. When she opened the door, rain slashed in, soaking her dress immediately. Cole lay propped against the wall, one hand pressed to his side where dark wetness seeped between his fingers. "What happened?" She knelt beside him, her free hand already reaching for the wound. Disagreement with some gentlemen about their intentions toward a lady's property. His attempt at a smile turned into a grimace. Seems they disagreed back. "Can you stand?" "With help." Lillian made a decision that would have surprised her a week ago. She leaned the shotgun against the doorframe and slipped her shoulder under his arm, taking his weight. Together they stumbled through the door and up the narrow stairs to her rooms above the saloon. The apartment was simple but clean, a sitting room with a small kitchen, a bedroom beyond. She'd made it comfortable in small ways, curtains from St. Louis, a rocking chair that had traveled from Missouri. Books lined on a shelf Frank had built in one of his rare, thoughtful moments. She deposited Cole in a chair near the stove, then lit more lamps. In the light, she could see the damage clearly. Blood soaked his shirt from a gash along his ribs, and his knuckles were split like he'd been using them for hammers. "This needs stitching," she said, examining the wound. "I can get Doc Morrison." "No." Cole caught her wrist, gentle despite the urgency. "No, doctor. They'll be watching." "They?" "3 of Dutch's boys. We're fixing to burn down your grain storage. Thought they should reconsider." Lillian pulled free, went to fetch her sewing basket and the bottle of whiskey she kept for emergencies. "And did they reconsider?" "In a manner of speaking, though I doubt they'll be reconsidering much of anything anymore." The implications settled over her like a cold blanket. 3 men dead. Because of her. Because of her stubborn refusal to pay protection money or run. "Don't," Cole said, reading her expression. "Don't take on guilt that isn't yours. They made their choices." "So did I." She returned with supplies, began cutting away his shirt. The wound was clean, but deep, running along his ribs like someone had tried to unzip him. "Hold still, this is going to hurt." Had worse. She poured whiskey over the gash, watched him go rigid but stay silent. As she threaded the needle, she found herself talking partly to distract him, partly to distract herself from the strange intimacy of the moment. "I learned to sew in St. Louis. The other girls at the Golden Note taught me. Said a woman should know how to mend things, clothes, curtains, people. Useful skill." His voice was tight as she made the first stitch. "More than I knew then. Frank got himself cut up regular. Bar fights, mostly. Got so I could stitch him up drunk or sober, though he was easier to manage drunk. A lucky man." Lillian paused, needle halfway through skin. "Frank wasn't lucky. He was mean and small and died the way he lived badly. But he was mine to patch up. And I did it because that was the bargain." "And what's our bargain?" She resumed stitching, each pass neat and precise. "I don't recall making one." "Sure you did. The minute you opened that door instead of leaving me to bleed." The rain intensified, drumming against the windows. In the warmth of the room, with lamplight catching on Cole's rain-wet hair and the strange domesticity of tending wounds, Lillian felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Not desire, though that was there too. Surprising in its suddenness. Something more dangerous. Tenderness. "There," she said, tying off the last stitch. "Try not to tear those open." Cole examined her work, nodded approval. "You ever think about being a doctor?" "Women don't get to be doctors. Women don't usually run saloons either." That earned him a small smile. She handed him the whiskey bottle. "For the pain." He took a pull, handed it back. Their fingers brushed in the exchange, and neither pulled away as quickly as they should have. The moment stretched, rain sound filling the silence. "You should go," Lillian said finally, though she didn't move away. "If they're watching, let them watch." Cole's hand covered hers, warm despite the blood loss. "I'm tired of running. Lillian, tired of drifting. Maybe it's time I stopped." "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "I know you sing when you think no one's listening. Know you water down Eddie Hancock's whiskey because he's got 5 kids to feed. Know you keep a loaded Derringer in 3 different places but haven't killed anyone yet. Though you've had cause. How could you possibly?" "I pay attention. It's what's kept me alive this long." He shifted, winced at the movement. "I know you're scared but won't show it. Know you're lonely but won't admit it. Know you look at me sometimes like you're trying to decide if I'm salvation or damnation." Lillian's breath caught. "And which are you?" "Haven't decided yet." She should pull away. Should send him back into the storm. Back to Ma Dudley's boarding house. Back to wherever men like him went when they weren't bleeding on good women's floors. Instead, she found herself leaning closer. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. The worst, he agreed. But when he kissed her, soft as rain and twice as inevitable, she kissed him back. It was nothing like Frank's whiskey-sour demands or Marcus Bellwood's entitled presumptions. It was a question and an answer all at once, gentle and fierce by turns. When they broke apart, Lillian's hands were shaking. "You need to leave," she said, but her fingers still tangled with his. "I know." Neither moved. "Dutch will come for you now, for both of us." "I know that, too." She helped him stand, found one of Frank's old shirts that would fit. As she helped him into it, careful of the stitches, he caught her hands. "Lock the doors. Load everything you've got. And if anyone comes tonight who isn't me..." "I know how to take care of myself." "I'm starting to believe that." He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "But let me worry anyway. It's been a long time since I had anything worth worrying about." After he left, slipping out the back door into the storm, Lillian stood in her 2 quiet rooms. She could still taste him whiskey and rain and possibility, could still feel the warmth of his hands, careful despite their strength. She'd been wrong earlier. He wasn't salvation or damnation. He was both. Lillian barred the doors, loaded the guns, and settled in to wait. Outside, the storm raged on, washing blood from the streets and carrying word of violence to those who traded in such currency. By morning, everyone would know that someone had stood against the stray irons, that 3 of Dutch Garrison's men wouldn't be riding home, that the Saloon Queen had found herself a guardian angel or a fellow devil. But tonight, in the lamplit sanctuary of her rooms, Lillian allowed herself one moment of pure, dangerous hope. She touched her lips, still feeling the promise Cole had left there. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. The storm passed near dawn, leaving crystal-clear skies and mud thick enough to swallow boots. Lillian hadn't slept, had spent the night watching shadows and jumping at sounds. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, painting Cheyenne in shades of gold and possibility, she unlocked her doors and descended to survey any damage. The saloon stood untouched, but she knew that would change. The real storm was still coming. The news traveled fast through Cheyenne's muddy streets. By noon, everyone knew about the 3 bodies found in an alley behind Morrison's feed store. Dutch Garrison's men, identified by their distinctive red bandanas and the iron brands they wore on their gun belts, the mark of the stray irons. Lillian heard the whispers as she swept the saloon's front steps. Conversations died when folks noticed her, then started up again in hushed tones. She kept her expression neutral, her movement steady, but inside her stomach churned like butter in the making. Cole hadn't returned. Miss Lillian. She turned to find Timothy Garrett, the telegraph operator's son, shifting from foot to foot in the morning sun. The boy couldn't be more than 12, all knees and elbows and worried eyes. "What is it?" "Timothy. My PA sent me, said to tell you there's been word from the north. Riders coming, maybe 20 of them." The broom stilled in her hands. 20 men. Dutch wasn't just sending a message, he was bringing an army. "When?" "Tomorrow, maybe the day after. Depends on the trails after the storm." Lillian reached into her apron, pressed a coin into the boy's palm. "Thank you. Tell your father I'm grateful." After Timothy scampered off, she stood alone on the steps, calculating odds that didn't add up. 20 men against, what, a saloon owner, a wounded drifter, and a town full of people who'd already shown their yellow streaks. Planning to sweep them to death. She spun to find Cole standing in the shadow of the building. He looked better than he had any right to clean-shaven, wearing fresh clothes, moving carefully but without the stiffness of the night before. "You're supposed to be resting," she said, hating how relief flooded through her at the sight of him. "Rest is for the dead." He climbed the steps, took the broom from her unresisting hands. "Heard about Timothy's message. Also heard you didn't sleep last night." "How could you possibly?" "Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She was up with her colicky baby. Saw your lamps burning all night. Worried you might be sick. Since when do you know Mrs. Chen? Since I started paying attention to who lives near what I care about. The words hung between them, weighted with meaning neither was ready to examine. Cole cleared his throat, gestured toward the saloon. We need to talk. Inside. They sat at the same table where they'd first measured each other, though everything between them had shifted since that night. Lillian poured coffee, black and strong enough to float horseshoes. 20 men, she said without preamble. We can't fight 20 men. No, Cole agreed. We can't. The simple admission hit harder than bravado would have. Lillian stared into her cup, seeing her future dissolve like sugar in rain. So I run after all. Or we change the game. She looked up sharply. How? Cole leaned back, winced slightly as the movement pulled at his stitches. Dutch Garrison strong because his men fear him more than they fear dying. But fear's a funny thing. Turn it around, and it bites the hand that feeds it. You're talking in riddles. I'm talking about ghosts. His eyes went distant, seeing something beyond the saloon's walls. Every man has them. Things done in the dark that won't stay buried. Dutch has more than most. You know him. Knew him. Back when he was Corporal Garrison, serving under Major Whitman in the territories, before he decided there was more profit in taking than protecting. Lillian felt the conversation shifting into dangerous territory. What kind of ghosts? The kind the Army would very much like to ask him about. Missing supply trains, dead witnesses, gold that was supposed to buy peace with the tribes but never made it to the negotiations. And you know this how? Cole met her eyes steadily. Because I was Lieutenant Cole Madison then, and I was supposed to be one of those dead witnesses. The name was different, but close enough. Madison to Maddox. A small change for a large escape. Lillian absorbed this information, fitting it into the puzzle of the man across from her. So you're not just running from grief, she said quietly. You're running from them. But some things you get tired of running from. He leaned forward. I've got something Dutch wants more than your saloon. Information that could see him hanged for treason. We can use that. Or it could get us both killed faster. Maybe, but dying on your feet beats living on your knees. Before Lillian could respond, the saloon doors burst open. 3 men entered, not Dutch's crew, but locals. Samuel Hart, who ran the bank, Dr. Morrison, and surprisingly, Judge Theodore Blackwood, recently arrived from Denver. Miss Crow, the judge said, removing his hat. Might we have a word? Lillian stood, smoothing her apron. Of course. Coffee, gentlemen. This isn't a social call, Hart said, his banker's face pinched with worry. We've come about the current situation. You mean Dutch Garrison? Precisely. Doctor. Morrison fidgeted with his medical bag. We've been discussing options. The town council feels you should accept Mr. Garrison's offer, Hart interrupted. A reasonable protection fee, paid monthly, ensures no one gets hurt. It's good business. It's extortion, Cole said quietly. The 3 men noticed him properly for the first time, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. I don't believe we've been introduced, Judge Blackwood said carefully. No, Cole agreed. You haven't. An uncomfortable silence stretched until Lillian broke it. Gentlemen, I appreciate your concern, but I won't be paying protection to anyone. This is my establishment, legally bought and operated. Legality means little to men like Garrison. Hart argued. Be practical. Woman, what's a few dollars against your life? Everything, Lillian said simply. You pay him once, you pay him forever, and the price always goes up. Then leave, Morrison suggested. Take what you can and go. No one would think less of you. I would. The judge studied her with sharp eyes that missed little. You're putting the entire town at risk for your pride. No, sir, I'm refusing to let this town die by degrees. Lillian moved to the window, gestured at the street beyond. You think paying garrison will stop with me. Next it'll be your bank, Samuel, then your practice, Doc, then every business, every family, until we're all working for the stray irons instead of ourselves. Better than bleeding for them? Hart muttered. Is it? Cole stood slowly, his presence filling the room in a way that had nothing to do with size. I've seen towns after Dutch is done with them. Empty shells full of broken people. That what you want for Cheyenne? What we want, Judge Blackwood said carefully, is to avoid bloodshed. Miss Crow, surely you can see reason. I see 3 men asking me to kneel so they don't have to stand. Lillian's voice could have frosted windows. If that's all you came to say, I have a business to run. The delegation left amid muttered warnings and dire predictions. When they were gone, Lillian sagged against the bar, suddenly exhausted. You know they'll turn on you. Cole said, when Dutch comes, they'll step aside and watch. I know. Then why fight it? She turned to face him, green eyes fierce with something that might have been desperation or determination. Because I've been stepping aside my whole life. For my father, who said women shouldn't sing. For Marcus, who thought he could buy me. For Frank, who married a decoration. I'm done stepping aside. Cole crossed to her, moving carefully around his injuries. Even if it means dying. Even then, he reached out, tucked a strand of auburn hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender enough to break hearts. Then we'd better make sure it doesn't come to that. How? By being smarter than Dutch expects. He's counting on fear and numbers. We'll give him something else. What? Doubt. Cole's smile was sharp as winter. A man who can't trust his own crew can't lead them, and Dutch has given plenty of them reason to doubt. Lillian caught his hand, held it against her cheek. This isn't your fight. It is now. Why? He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, because I've been dead for 3 years. Lillian, moving, breathing, but dead all the same. Last night, bleeding on your floor. I felt alive for the first time since Sarah. Cole, let me finish. He framed her face with both hands, thumbs tracing her cheekbones. I don't know if this is redemption or just another way to die. But I'd rather burn fighting for something worth saving than fade away in another dusty nowhere. The kiss was different from the night before, desperate rather than gentle. A promise sealed in desperation. When they broke apart, both breathing hard. Lillian saw her own fears and hopes reflected in his eyes. Tell me your plan, she said. And there, in the afternoon light of a doomed saloon, Cole Madison, who'd become Cole Maddox to survive, began laying out a strategy that would either save them all or leave them buried in Cheyenne's boot hill. Either way, they'd face it together. The rain returned that night, softer than before but persistent, turning the streets of Cheyenne into rivers of mud. Lillian closed the saloon early. No sense pretending anyone would venture out for whiskey when the whole town held its breath, waiting for Dutch Garrison's arrival. She was wiping down tables when she heard a soft knock at the back door. 3 short, 2 long, the pattern Cole had shown her. Her hand found the shotgun automatically before she went to answer. He stood on the landing, water streaming from his hat brim, and for a moment she hardly recognized him. Gone was the controlled gunman who'd walked into her saloon a week ago. This man looked hollowed out, haunted by whatever he'd been doing in the shadows of the coming storm. It's done, he said simply. Lillian pulled him inside, barred the door behind them. In the lamplight, she could see mud caking his boots, a tear in his coat sleeve, the exhaustion that ran bone deep. What's done? Sent word north to men Dutch thought were dead, to families who lost sons to his greed. Cole slumped into a chair, accepting the whiskey she poured without asking. By tomorrow, Dutch will know his past is riding to meet him. How many? Enough. He drained the glass, stared at the empty bottom like it might hold answers. Tom Brennan's brothers. The Yazzie family, what's left of them. Others who remember what happened at Willow Creek. Lillian knew she should ask about Willow Creek, should understand what forces Cole was summoning. Instead, she found herself kneeling beside his chair, taking his mud-stained hands in hers. "You're burning yourself to light this fire," she said quietly. "Already burned. Lillian, 3 years ago, when I let Dutch ride away instead of putting a bullet in him." His hands tightened on hers. "Should have died with the others. Would have, if I hadn't been scouting ahead when they—" "Don't!" She rose, pressed his head against her middle, fingers tangling in his rain-damp hair. "Whatever happened then, you're here now. That's what matters." They stayed like that, finding comfort in simple touch while rain drummed against windows and time ticked toward confrontation. Finally, Cole pulled back, looked up at her with eyes that held too much history. "I need to tell you something. About Willow Creek. About why Dutch wants me dead more than he wants your saloon." Lillian settled into the chair beside him, their knees touching. "Tell me." "The army was negotiating a treaty. Peace with the Northern Cheyenne in exchange for gold enough to buy food, blankets, medicine. I was assigned to escort the payment, along with 12 good men and a scout named Joseph Yazzie." Cole's voice went flat. "Reportorial. Dutch was supposed to provide additional security with his squad. But he didn't." "Oh, he provided security. For himself." Bitterness crept into his tone. "Ambushed us 10 miles from Willow Creek. Made it look like a Cheyenne raid. Killed everyone's soldiers. Joseph even burned the bodies to hide the bullet wounds." "Except you." "I was watering horses upstream. Heard the shots, saw the smoke. By the time I got there—" He shook his head. 12 men dead for 30,000 in gold. That's what Dutch figured their lives were worth." Lillian felt sick. She'd known Dutch was dangerous, but this was evil of a different magnitude. "Why didn't you report it?" "To who Major Whitman was getting his cut. Half the territorial command was on Dutch's payroll." Cole laughed, sharp and humorless. "I tried. Wrote letters. Sent telegrams. They all disappeared. Then Dutch's men came for me one night in Laramie. I've been Cole Maddox ever since. And now?" "Now there's a new commander at Fort Russell. Colonel James Hartley, honest man. They say, and Judge Blackwood, for all his talk of avoiding bloodshed, has a reputation for following the law." Cole met her eyes. "I kept copies of everything. Dates, names, amounts. Hidden them in places Dutch would never think to look. If something happens to me—" "Nothing's going to happen to you." The words came out fiercer than Lillian intended. "If it does," Cole continued steadily, "there's a package at the Wells Fargo office in Denver, addressed to you. Inside is everything needed to see Dutch hang." "I don't want your insurance policies. I want you alive." "Can't always get what we want." But he softened the words by lifting her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with unexpected gentleness. "Though I'm starting to think maybe we deserve to try." A crash from the front of the saloon shattered the moment. Lillian grabbed the shotgun while Cole drew his Colt, both moving with the synchronized instinct of the hunted. "Stay here," Cole whispered. Like hell. They crept through the darkened saloon together, shadows among shadows. Through the front windows, Lillian could see shapes moving in the street riders, their horses standing patient in the rain. "Too early for Dutch," Cole murmured. "Unless—" The front door exploded inward, kicked open by a boot that had seen too many doors yield. 3 men entered, weapons drawn, water dripping from their coats. Not the stray irons, their clothes were too poor, their guns too old. "Cole Madison," the lead man called out. "We know you're here. Tom Brennan sent us." Cole stepped into view, gun lowered but ready. "Patrick." "Aye." Patrick Brennan moved into the lamplight, revealing a face marked by years and grief. "Been a long time, Lieutenant." "Not lieutenant anymore. You are to us." Patrick's companion spread out, not threatening, but watchful. Tom got your message. Said if you were finally ready to move against that bastard garrison, we'd back your play. How many came? 8 of us. So far. More coming. Patrick's smile was grim. Turns out Dutch made a lot of enemies over the years. Man can't kill that many people without leaving some alive who remember. Lillian lowered her shotgun, stepped forward. I'm Lillian Crow. This is my place. Patrick touched his hat brim. Ma'am, Tom said to tell you we're not here to bring trouble to your town, just to finish old business. Old business that might burn down my town in the process. Maybe. But from what we hear, Dutch plans to burn it anyway. Patrick looked between her and Cole, something knowing in his expression. Sometimes you gotta fight fire with fire. Cole holstered his weapon. Where are the others? Camped north of town. Didn't want to spook anyone by riding in together. Patrick accepted the whiskey Lillian offered. Knocked it back neat. What's the plan? Lieutenant? First, stop calling me that. Cole moved to the window, studied the empty street. Second, we need to be smart about this. Dutch has 20 men, maybe more. We can't match him gun for gun. Don't need to. One of Patrick's companions spoke up, a lean man with predator eyes. Just need to make him bleed enough that his men reconsider their employment. This is Josiah Redtail, Patrick said by way of introduction. Lost his brother at Willow Creek. Josiah nodded to Lillian, then fixed his attention on Cole. The Yazzie family sends their regards. They'll be here tomorrow, along with some others who remember what Dutch did to their kin. The pieces were falling into place. Lillian realized, not a straight fight, but something more complex, a convergence of old sins coming home to roost. She felt the weight of it settling over her saloon, her town, her life. You can still leave, Cole said quietly, reading her expression. This isn't... If you tell me this isn't my fight one more time, I'll shoot you myself. She moved to the bar, began pulling bottles. If we're planning a war, we'll need whiskey, good whiskey. And food. When's the last time any of you ate? The tension broke slightly. Patrick actually smiled. Your woman's got sand, Madison. Not my woman, Cole and Lillian said simultaneously, then caught each other's eyes across the room. Something passed between them, acknowledgement of a lie neither quite believed anymore. Right, Patrick said, clearly unconvinced. Well, whoever's woman she is, she's right about food. My boys could eat. What followed was perhaps the strangest hour in the Copper Flame's history. Lillian found herself cooking eggs and bacon for men who'd come to kill, while they cleaned weapons and told stories about brothers and friends Dutch garrison had murdered. The domesticity of it, the smell of food, the clink of glasses, the low voices planning violence created a surreal counterpoint to the storm outside. Cole moved through it all like a ghost made flesh, checking windows, speaking quietly with each man, rebuilding connections from a life he'd tried to leave buried, watching him. Lillian saw the officer he'd been competent, carrying the weight of command like a familiar burden. He's different, Patrick said, appearing at her elbow as she sliced bread. The lieutenant, you've done something to him. I haven't done anything. No, Patrick studied her with eyes that had seen too much. 3 years we've been trying to get him to stand up, fight back. 3 years of running, hiding, dying by inches. Then your name shows up in a message, and suddenly he's ready for war. Lillian focused on her knife work. Maybe he just got tired of running. Maybe. Patrick lowered his voice. When this is over, if we survive, it take care of him. Yeah, a man like that needs something to fight for besides ghosts. Before she could respond, Cole appeared at her other side. They need to go. Dawn's not far off, and Dutch will have scouts out. Patrick gathered his men with a gesture. At the door, he turned back. Tomorrow night, then, unless Dutch comes early. He won't, Cole said with certainty. He'll want the town to see his arrival. Make a show of it. That's his way. After they left, slipping back into the rain like wraiths, Lillian and Cole stood alone in the saloon. The lamp flames flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "You should sleep," Cole said. "Tomorrow will be." She silenced him with a kiss, fierce and desperate. When they broke apart, she kept her hands fisted in his shirt. "Stop trying to say goodbye." "I'm trying to be realistic." "Then be realistic upstairs, in a bed, with me." The words hung between them, offer and challenge combined. "Unless you'd rather spend what might be our last night playing noble." Cole studied her face, searching for something. Whatever he found made his expression soften. "You sure?" "I've been sure since you bled on my floor." She stepped back, held out her hand. "Question is, are you?" He took her hand, let her lead him upstairs. The storm continued its assault on Cheyenne, but in Lillian's rooms above the saloon, they found shelter in each other, two damaged souls claiming warmth against the cold promise of tomorrow's violence. When dawn finally broke, pale and watery through the rain, they lay entwined, no longer trying to pretend this was anything but what it had become: love. Unexpected and probably doomed, but no less real for its terrible timing. "Whatever happens," Lillian whispered against his chest, "I'm glad you walked into my saloon." Cole's arms tightened around her. "So am I. God help me. So am I." Outside, the rain began to slacken. Soon it would stop entirely, and Dutch Garrison would come to claim what he thought was his. But he'd find more than one woman defending her saloon. He'd find his past waiting, armed and ready to collect old debts. The reckoning was coming. Word of Dutch Garrison's approach reached Cheyenne at noon. Timothy Garrett ran through the streets, mud splashing his trousers, shouting the news. 22 riders, moving slow and deliberate down the main road, red bandanas visible even from a distance. Lillian stood behind her bar, checking the loads in her shotgun for the third time. The saloon was empty except for Cole and old Pete, who'd refused to leave despite her protests. "Ain't running from no Montana trash," Pete had said, producing an ancient Navy Colt from somewhere in his mop bucket. "Been in this town longer than most. I'll die in it if I have to." Now they waited, listening to the sound of hoofbeats growing closer. Through the windows, Lillian could see townspeople shuttering their shops, pulling children indoors. Even the dogs had gone quiet. "Remember," Cole said, checking his own weapons, "Dutch will want to talk first. Make a show of his power. That gives us time." "Time for what?" "For doubt to spread." He moved to the window, peered out carefully. Patrick's men are in position. The Yazzie brothers are on the hotel roof. Others scattered through town. Dutch doesn't know it yet, but he's riding into a crossfire. Neither does the town. Better that way. Fear makes people unpredictable. The hoofbeats stopped. In the sudden silence, Lillian could hear her own heartbeat, rapid as a bird's. Then came the creak of leather, the jingle of spurs, the sound of boots on boardwalk. The saloon doors swung open. Dutch Garrison entered first, and Lillian understood immediately why men followed him. He was big, not just tall, but broad, filling the doorway like a force of nature. His face was handsome in a brutal way, marked by a scar that ran from temple to chin. But it was his eyes that held her attention, pale blue, empty as winter sky, holding nothing but calculation. "Miss Crow." His voice was cultured, unexpected from such a rough exterior. "I believe we have business to discuss." 6 men followed him in, spreading through the saloon with practiced efficiency. The rest, she knew, would be outside, covering exits, watching windows. Professional, dangerous. "Mr. Garrison," Lillian kept her voice steady, her hands visible on the bar. "Welcome to the Copper Flame." "Ah, hospitality." Dutch smiled, showing too many teeth. "How refreshing. Usually, people are less welcoming when I arrive." "Usually. You've already burned something down by now." The day is young. He moved deeper into the room, spurs ringing against the floor. His men shifted with him, maintaining their positions. But I'm hoping we can avoid such unpleasantness. You seem like a reasonable woman. Reasonable enough? Good. Then you'll understand my position. Dutch pulled out a chair, sat down as if he owned the place. This territory is expanding. The railroad brings commerce. Commerce brings wealth. Wealth brings complications. Someone needs to maintain order. I thought that was the marshal's job. Your marshal ran as they do. Dutch accepted the whiskey one of his men poured, studied it against the light. I provide a more reliable service. Protection from the lawless elements that plague these frontier towns. Protection from everyone but you. His smile widened. Exactly, you are reasonable. Cole hadn't moved from his position by the window, but Lillian could feel his tension like heat from a stove. Dutch hadn't acknowledged him yet, a deliberate slight, or perhaps he hadn't recognized him. 3 years and a different name could change a man. Your protection comes at a price, Lillian said. Everything worthwhile does, for you. Shall we say, 20% of your monthly take, very fair, considering what happened to the last establishment that refused my services. And if I refuse, Dutch sighed theatrically, then I'm afraid my men might become unruly. You know how cowboys get when they're disappointed? Property damage, fires. Sometimes people get hurt. He leaned forward. Your friend there, for instance, he seems familiar. Have we met? Cole turned from the window. Face carefully neutral. Don't believe so. No. Dutch studied him, those empty eyes searching. You remind me of someone. A soldier I knew once. But he's dead now. They're all dead. Sorry for your loss. Oh, it wasn't my loss. Dutch's smile turned sharp. Quite the opposite. In fact, the tension in the room ratcheted higher. Lillian saw hands drift toward weapons, saw Pete tighten his grip on the Colt hidden beneath his bar rag. Outside, she caught a glimpse of movement Patrick's men, shifting positions. About that protection money, she said, drawing Dutch's attention back. I have a counteroffer. Do you now leave town? Don't come back. I'll even pay for your supplies for the road. Dutch laughed a sound like breaking glass. Oh, I do like you. Such spirit. It'll make breaking you so much more satisfying. Like you broke those soldiers at Willow Creek. The laughter died. The room went still as a held breath. Dutch's eyes narrowed, flicking between her and Cole. Now that's an interesting thing to say. Where would a saloon owner hear about classified military operations? Maybe from one of the ghosts you left there. Dutch stood slowly, his men tensing. Madison, goddamn, Cole Madison. Hello, Dutch. Cole stepped away from the window, hand hovering near his gun. Been a while. 3 years. I looked for you. You know, spent good money trying to find where you'd crawled off to die. Dutch's face had gone cold, all pretense of civilization dropping away. Should have known you'd turn up like a bad penny. Should have done a better job killing me the first time. Well, Dutch spread his hands. I'm happy to correct that oversight. What happened next would be debated in Cheyenne for years. Some said Cole drew first, others swore it was one of Dutch's men. But Lillian, who was watching, knew the truth. It was old Pete who started it all. The swamper had worked his way behind one of Dutch's men, moving with the invisibility that came from years of being overlooked. When he pressed his ancient Colt against the outlaw's kidney and said, "Drop it, Sonny!" The man spun, startled. His elbow caught Pete in the face. The Colt went off, the bullet punching through the saloon's tin ceiling. And then everyone was moving. Cole's draw was poetry smooth, fast, deadly. His first shot took the man nearest to Lillian. Spinning him away from the bar, Dutch dove behind a table, overturning it, while his men scrambled for cover. Lillian dropped behind the bar as bullets filled the air like angry hornets. She came up with a shotgun, fired both barrels at a man trying to flank Cole. The buckshot turned him into a red mist and splinters. Glass shattered. Men shouted. The mirror behind the bar exploded in a cascade of silver. Through it all, Lillian could hear other shots from outside Patrick's men engaging Dutch's riders in the street. "The back!" Cole shouted, firing as he moved. "Get to—" A bullet caught him high in the shoulder, spinning him around. He went down hard, gun skittering across the floor. "Cole!" Lillian started toward him, but Dutch rose from behind his table, revolver aimed at her head. "Now that's better," he said, blood running from a gash on his forehead. "Everyone just calm down." The shooting stuttered to a stop, though the sound of battle continued outside. 3 of Dutch's men were down, along with Pete, who lay still in a spreading pool of blood. The survivors kept their guns trained on Cole and Lillian. "You know," Dutch said conversationally, "I was going to let you live. Miss Crow, take my money. Leave you to run your little saloon. But now," he shook his head, "now I think I'll burn it down with both of you inside. Fitting end for a traitor and his whore." "Go to hell," Lillian spat. "Ladies first." Dutch cocked his revolver. The shot was impossibly loud in the enclosed space. Lillian flinched, waiting for the impact. But Dutch was the one who staggered, looking down in surprise at the blood spreading across his vest. Behind him, Judge Theodore Blackwood stood in the doorway, smoking rifle in his hands. "That's for Willow Creek," the judge said quietly, "and for the rule of law." Dutch turned, raising his gun toward this new threat. Lillian didn't think. She snatched up Cole's fallen Colt and fired, the weight of it bucking in her hand. Once, twice, 3 times, each bullet finding its mark. Dutch Garrison fell to his knees, then forward, those empty blue eyes finally filled with something surprise, perhaps that his story could end this way. The surviving outlaws looked at their fallen leader, then at each other, one by one. They dropped their weapons, hands raising in surrender. "Smart choice," the judge said, covering them with his rifle. "The town's crawling with federal marshals. Came in on the morning train. Seems someone sent evidence of Major Whitman's corruption ring all the way to Washington." Lillian barely heard him. She was already at Cole's side, pressing her hands against the wound in his shoulder. "Don't you dare die on me." "Wouldn't dream of it." His voice was weak but amused. "You still owe me a drink. I owe you a lot more than that." The battle outside was winding down. Dutch's leaderless men surrendering or fleeing. Through the broken windows, Lillian could see townspeople emerging from their hiding places, staring in wonder at the federal marshals who were suddenly, miraculously, everywhere. "You planned this," she said to Cole, understanding flooding through her. "The judge, the marshals, you arranged it all. Couldn't let you face them alone." He reached up with his good hand, touched her face. "Told you I was tired of running." Dr. Morrison appeared, medical bag in hand, and Lillian reluctantly let him take over. She stood slowly, surveying the wreckage of her saloon. Broken glass, splintered wood, blood on the sawdust floor. It would take weeks to repair, maybe months. But they were alive. Against all odds, they were alive. "Miss Crow," Judge Blackwood approached, stepping carefully around Dutch's body. "I owe you an apology. When I came here yesterday, I was playing a role, trying not to tip our hand. But you were right, sometimes you have to stand up to evil, not accommodate it. You could have warned us, and risk word getting to Dutch. He had informants everywhere." The judge looked down at the dead outlaw. "Cole insisted we do it this way. Said you wouldn't run, no matter what. He was right. He also said you were worth any risk." The judge smiled slightly. "I'm beginning to see why." As the afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light through the ruined saloon, Lillian knelt beside Cole again. The doctor had bandaged his shoulder. given him laudanum for the pain, but his eyes were clear when they found hers. "We did it," he said softly. "We did." "What now?" Lillian looked around at her broken kingdom, then back at the man who'd helped her defend it. "Now we rebuild, together. If you're staying, try to make me leave." She kissed him then, gentle and sure, tasting whiskey and gunpowder and the promise of tomorrow. Around them, Cheyenne began the work of becoming whole again, freed from the shadow of the stray irons. It wasn't a fairy tale ending too much blood for that, too much loss, but it was enough. They were alive, they were together, and they had a chance to build something from the ashes. In the Wyoming Territory of 1882, that was its own kind of miracle. The town buried its dead on a Thursday. The sky hung low and gray, fitting for the occasion, as Reverend Miller read words over Pete's pine coffin. Half of Cheyenne turned out more than Lillian expected for a saloon swamper, but Pete had been part of the town's fabric longer than most realized. Cole stood beside her, his left arm still in a sling, his presence solid and reassuring. The federal marshals had taken Dutch's body and his surviving men north to Fort Russell for trial. The stray irons were broken, scattered to the winds, but their shadow lingered in bullet holes and blood stains. "He was a good man," Mrs. Chen whispered, dabbing at her eyes. "Helped me with my laundry when my husband was sick. Never took payment." Lillian nodded, her throat tight. She'd found Pete's room at the boarding house nearly empty, just a Bible, a daguerreotype of a woman who might have been his wife, and a coffee can containing $17 and a note, "For my funeral. Don't let them put me in Potter's Field." After the service, the crowd dispersed slowly, neighbors stopping to press Lillian's hand or nod to Cole. The story of the shootout had already begun its transformation into legend, growing with each telling, until soon Pete would have taken down half the outlaws single-handed. "Let them talk," Cole said when she mentioned it. "Heroes deserve their stories, even if they're mostly lies." Back at the saloon, Lillian surveyed the damage in full daylight. It was worse than she'd thought. The mirror was gone, of course, along with most of the bottles behind the bar. Bullets had chewed through tables and chairs, leaving splinters and sawdust. The piano had taken a shot through its heart, killing any music it might have held. "Going to take money to fix this," she said, running her hand along the scarred bar top. "Money you have." Samuel Hart appeared in the doorway, looking uncomfortable but determined. "The town council met this morning. We've established a restoration fund. It's the least we can do." Lillian studied the banker's pinched face. "Guilt money." "Call it what you like." Hart removed his spectacles, cleaned them nervously. "We failed you, Miss Crow. Failed the whole town. When you stood up to Garrison, we should have stood with you. But you didn't." "No, we didn't." He replaced his spectacles, met her eyes. "But we can help rebuild what was broken, if you'll let us." Before Lillian could respond, Cole spoke up. "How much?" "Enough. More than enough." Hart pulled out a ledger. "Between the council allocation and private donations, plus the bounty money from Dutch and his men." "Bounty money." "Didn't you know?" Hart looked surprised. "Dutch Garrison had a $5,000 price on his head. Federal warrant. It's yours by right, you and Mr. Madison." Lillian felt the floor shift beneath her feet. $5,000. With that money, she could do more than rebuild. She could transform the Copper Flame into something grand. Or she could leave, start fresh somewhere without bullet holes and blood stains. "Think about it," Hart said, setting the ledger on the bar. "The money's there when you decide." After he left, Lillian and Cole stood in the wreckage of what had been, surrounded by ghosts and possibilities. "You could go anywhere," Cole said quietly. "Back to St. Louis, even sing again. Is that what you think I want?" "I think you deserve better than a broken saloon in a town that let you down." Lillian moved to him, careful of his injured shoulder. "And what do you deserve?" Less than I've gotten. His good arm wrapped around her waist. You saved my life, Lillian, in more ways than one. You saved mine first. Then we're even. No, she said, pressing her forehead against his. We're just getting started. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lillian opened it to find Patrick Brennan and the Yazzie brothers, hats in hand. Sorry to intrude. Patrick said, We're heading out. Wanted to say goodbye. And thank you, Joseph Yazzie added, his weathered face solemn. What you did standing up to Dutch, it means something. Not just to us, but to all the families he hurt. I didn't do it for them, Lillian said honestly. Doesn't matter why you did it. Joseph reached into his coat, pulled out a small leather pouch. This was my father's. He was a medicine man before Willow Creek. Said it would protect the bearer from evil. I can't accept. Please. He pressed it into her hands. Evil found him anyway, but maybe it'll do better by you. After they left, Lillian opened the pouch. Inside was a small turquoise stone, smooth from years of handling, warm to the touch. Protection from evil, she murmured. Bit late for that, Cole said, but his voice was gentle. The next days blurred together in a haze of hammering and sawdust. The town's guilt translated into eager hands carpenters working for free, donations of lumber and glass, women bringing food for the workers. The copper flame began to rise from its ashes, different but stronger. Lillian found Cole one evening standing where Pete had died, staring at the fresh floorboards that covered the stains. I've been thinking, he said without preamble, about names. Names. Madison's dead. Has been for 3 years. He turned to her. But Maddox might have a future, if he had a reason to stay. Doesn't he? I need to know something first. Cole moved closer, his expression serious. What happens when this is over, when the saloon's rebuilt and the town moves on? What happens to us? Lillian considered the question, though she'd already known her answer since the night he bled on her floor. That depends. On whether you're planning to drift again. I won't be a way station. Cole, not for anyone. And if I said I was done drifting, if I said I wanted to wake up in the same bed, in the same town, with the same woman for whatever years we've got left, then I'd say you'd better make an honest woman of me first. I've got a reputation to maintain. The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise after a long night. Lillian Crow, are you proposing? Someone has to. You're too busy being noble. He kissed her then, there in the half-rebuilt saloon with sawdust in the air and hope taking root in the ruins. When they broke apart, both breathing hard. Cole's eyes were bright with something that looked like peace. Yes, he said simply. I didn't actually ask. Yes to all of it. Marriage, the saloon, Cheyenne. Whatever future you're offering, my answer is yes. Judge Blackwood married them the following Sunday, with half the town crowded into the newly repaired saloon. Lillian wore her mother's dress, altered to fit and only slightly faded. Cole had found a proper suit somewhere, though he still wore his guns, old habits dying hard. Dr. Morrison gave the bride away, his eyes suspiciously wet. Mrs. Chen's children scattered rose petals where she'd found roses in Wyoming territory. No one asked. Even Hart was there, having appointed himself keeper of the wedding fund with the same zeal he'd shown for the restoration. Do you, Cole Maddox, take this woman? The name felt right. Lillian thought. Not Madison with his ghosts. Not the drifter who'd walked in that first night, but Maddox, a man choosing his future instead of running from his past. I do. And do you, Lillian Crow? She almost said yes before the judge finished, earning chuckles from the crowd. I do. Then, by the authority vested in me by Wyoming territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. The cheer that went up could have raised the roof. Someone had found a fiddle player not as good as the old piano, but joyful enough. Whiskey flowed freely. And for once, Lillian didn't measure the portions. As the sun set over Cheyenne, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the newlyweds stood outside their saloon. The new sign gleamed, "The Copper Flame Maddox and Maddox Proprietors." "It's not St. Louis," Cole said, arm around his wife's waist. "No," Lillian agreed, leaning into his warmth. "It's better. It's home." Inside, their guests celebrated life in the face of death. Joy carved from sorrow. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges running a business, building a marriage, creating a life from the ashes of their separate pasts. But tonight, in a saloon rebuilt by community and consecrated by hope, Cole and Lillian Maddox danced to fiddle music while the stars came out over Wyoming territory. They'd found each other in violence and uncertainty, but they'd chosen each other in peace. It was, Reverend Miller would later say, the finest wedding Cheyenne had ever seen. Not for its grandeur, but for its promise that, even in the hardest ground, love could take root and bloom. The copper flame glowed with lamplight and laughter, a beacon in the darkness that said, "Here stands something worth fighting for, something worth protecting, something worth staying for." The seasons turned gently that first year of marriage. Spring brought wildflowers to the cemetery where Pete lay. Summer scorched the plains golden, and autumn arrived with its harvest of contentment. Through it all, Cole and Lillian built their life together with the careful attention of people who knew how fragile happiness could be. The copper flame prospered. Word had spread along the railroad lines about the saloon where Dutch Garrison met his end, and curious travelers often stopped to see the famous bullet holes Lillian had refused to patch in the ceiling, part of history, she'd say, pouring drinks beneath them. But prosperity wasn't what transformed Cole. It was the small things coffee shared at dawn before the town woke, Lillian singing softly while she worked, the weight of her beside him at night chasing away dreams of Willow Creek. He'd stopped looking over his shoulder, stopped checking exits first when entering a room. The constant readiness for violence that had lived in his muscles for 3 years slowly unwound. "You're getting soft," Lillian teased one morning, finding him still in bed past sunrise. "Maybe," he agreed, pulling her back down beside him. "Is that so bad?" "Not bad at all." They'd fallen into rhythms, Cole handling supplies and the rougher customers while Lillian managed the books and the bar. He'd discovered an aptitude for carpentry, spending quiet afternoons crafting furniture to replace what the shootout had destroyed. His hands, so long used only for weapons, learned to create instead of destroy. It was during one of those afternoons, as October painted the aspens gold, that Joseph Yazzie returned. "Mrs. Maddox," he said, hat in hand at the saloon's back door. "Sorry to disturb." "Joseph." Lillian set down the glass she'd been polishing. "Is everything all right?" "Yes and no." He shifted, uncomfortable. "Is your husband here?" Cole emerged from the storeroom, recognizing trouble in the man's stance. "What is it?" "Remember I said Dutch had hurt many families?" "I remember." "Well, seems some of his men, the ones who scattered, they've been talking about the gold from Willow Creek." Cole went still. Lillian had learned to read his silences, and this one spoke of old dangers returning. "What about it?" Cole asked carefully. "Word is Dutch hid it somewhere before he came to Cheyenne. 30,000 in Army gold, waiting for whoever finds it." Joseph met Cole's eyes. "Men are starting to look desperate, men. Thought you should know." After Joseph left, Cole stood at the window, watching the street. Lillian could see the tension creeping back into his shoulders, the past reasserting its claim. "It's just rumors," she said. "Maybe, but rumors have a way of bringing trouble." "Then we'll handle it, like we did before." He turned to her, and she saw the war in his face, the desire to protect her battling with the knowledge that she wouldn't let him carry it alone. "This is different. These men won't announce themselves like Dutch did. They'll come quiet, in the night." Then we'd better be ready. The first searcher arrived 2 weeks later, a thin man with fever-bright eyes who asked too many questions about the old days. Cole sent him on his way with a warning. The second came with 2 friends, less subtle in their interest. They left town after Cole had a quiet conversation with them behind the livery stable. But they kept coming, drawn by the promise of gold and the legend that grew with each telling. The story had twisted in the retelling. Now it was 50,000. Now 100. Now it was hidden beneath the copper flame itself. "We can't keep this up," Lillian said one night, after the third group that week had been discouraged. "Eventually someone will come that you can't scare off." "I know." Cole sat at their kitchen table, cleaning his guns with mechanical precision. "I've been thinking about ending this permanently." "How?" "By finding the gold first." Lillian set down her sewing. "You know where it is." "I know Dutch. Know how he thought." Cole reassembled the Colt with practiced ease. He wouldn't have hidden it far from his base in Montana, but not so close that his own men might stumble on it. There's an old mining claim about 15 miles north of here, abandoned since the silver played out. Dutch mentioned it once, years ago. "And you think the gold's there?" "It's where I'd hide it." He met her eyes. "But recovering it means leaving you alone for at least 3 days." "Then I'm coming with you." "Lillian, we're partners. Remember, in everything." They left before dawn 2 days later, telling only Dr. Morrison they'd be gone. The old man would look after the saloon, serve drinks with shaking hands but steady nerve. The ride north was cold, autumn sharp in the air, but Lillian had grown comfortable in the saddle these past months. Ranch life agreed with her in ways St. Louis never had. The mining claim sat in a box canyon, its buildings collapsed by time and weather. They searched methodically, Cole directing based on his understanding of Dutch's mind. It was Lillian who found it, recognizing fresh tool marks on what looked like an old cave-in. "He was here recently," she said. "These marks are maybe 6 months old." They dug carefully, alert for other searchers. 6 feet down, Cole's shovel hit wood. The strongbox was military issue, still bearing U.S. Army stamps. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, was more gold than Lillian had ever seen. 30,000, Cole said quietly. "Blood money from 12 good men." "What do we do with it?" Cole was quiet for a long moment, staring at the gold that had cost so many lives. "We make it right, as much as we can." They spent that night camped under stars, planning. The gold would be divided portions to the families of the Willow Creek dead, to the Yazzie family for their losses, to the town of Cheyenne for a school that Pete had always talked about wanting. The rest would go to Fort Russell's new commander, returning it to Army coffers with a full account of how it came to be lost. "It won't bring them back," Cole said, staring into the fire. "No, but it's justice of a kind." "Is it enough?" Lillian took his hand. "It has to be." The ride back was slower, weighted down by gold and responsibility. They were 5 miles from Cheyenne when the ambush came, 3 men emerging from a stand of cottonwoods, guns drawn. "That's far enough," the leader called. Lillian recognized him, one of the questioners from the week before. "We'll take that pack horse and be on our way." "Can't do that," Cole said calmly, though his hand rested on his gun. 3 against 2, and one of you's a woman." "Your mistake," Lillian said, "is thinking that matters." What followed was brief but decisive. Cole's first shot took the leader's gun hand, Lillian's derringer, pulled from her sleeve, discouraged the second man. The third, seeing the odds change, threw down his weapon. "Take your friend and go," Cole said. "Spread the word the gold's been found and returned. Anyone else comes looking will find the same welcome." As they rode on, leaving the would-be thieves to their regrets, Lillian felt something settle in her chest. Not peace, exactly, that would always be fragile in a land this hard, but acceptance. This was their life now, defending what they'd built against whatever came. You know there'll be others, she said. For a while, until the story changes, becomes about something else. And we'll be ready. Together. They returned to Cheyenne as the sun set, the gold heavy in their saddlebags but their consciences lighter. Judge Blackwood took possession of the strongbox, promising to see it distributed according to their wishes. Dr. Morrison had kept the saloon running, though he'd watered the whiskey considerably. That night, as they lay in bed above the copper flame, Lillian traced the scar on Cole's shoulder, healed now but still pink. "Any regrets?" she asked. "About all of it. Staying, fighting, marrying a stubborn saloon owner." Cole turned to face her, his expression soft in the lamplight. "My only regret is that it took me so long to find you." Sweet talker. Truth teller. He kissed her forehead. "Though I do have one complaint." "Oh." "Your coffee's terrible." She hit him with a pillow, and their laughter filled the room, chasing away the shadows of gold and greed. Below them, the saloon stood quiet, waiting for tomorrow's customers. Above them, stars wheeled across the Wyoming sky, indifferent to human struggles. But in their bed, in their room, in their life built from ashes and hope, Cole and Lillian Maddox held each other close. The gold was gone, returned to wherever justice directed. The ghosts of Willow Creek could rest easier, and two damaged souls had found in each other not just love, but home. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. Winter came early that year, blanketing Cheyenne in white silence. The copper flame glowed warm against the cold, its windows golden rectangles in the snow-covered street. Inside, Cole added logs to the fire while Lillian tallied the month's receipts. A comfortable routine they'd settled into like an old married couple, though they'd been wed less than a year. It was a Tuesday evening, quiet except for a few regulars nursing whiskeys, when she walked in. Sarah Madison, Cole's dead wife. She stood in the doorway like an apparition, snow dusting her dark traveling cloak, her face gaunt but unmistakably alive. The glass in Cole's hand shattered on the floor. "Hello, Cole," she said, and her voice was exactly as Lillian had imagined from the way Cole spoke of her, soft, cultured, carrying hurt like a stone. The saloon went silent. Even the regulars sensed something momentous, though they couldn't know what. Lillian watched her husband's face cycle through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been grief or joy, or both tangled together. "Sarah," the name came out broken. "You're dead. I saw the grave." "You saw what my father wanted you to see." She moved into the light, and Lillian could see she'd been beautiful once, before whatever had carved those lines around her eyes and mouth. "May I come in? It's cold." Cole nodded mutely. Lillian stepped forward, extending a lifetime of ingrained hospitality despite the earthquake in her chest. "Please, sit by the fire. I'll get you something warm." Sarah's eyes found hers then, taking in the wedding ring, the proprietary way Lillian moved behind the bar. "You must be his wife." "Lillian Maddox." She poured coffee with steady hands, though her mind raced. "You must be tired from your journey." 8 years tired." Sarah accepted the cup gratefully. "Thank you." The regulars had the sense to finish their drinks and leave, tipping their hats to Lillian, eyeing the stranger with curiosity they'd satisfy later with gossip. Soon it was just the three of them and the crackling fire. "Explain," Cole said finally. He hadn't moved from where he stood, as if movement might shatter whatever spell held his dead wife in their saloon. "The letter said typhoid. Your father wrote—" "My father wrote what I asked him to." Sarah stared into her coffee. It was easier than the truth. "Which was—" "That I was carrying another man's child." The words fell into silence like stones into deep water. Lillian saw Cole flinch as if struck. "Who's—" His voice was flat, dangerous. "Thomas Bellingham, your major's son." Sarah raised her chin, defiant even in confession. You were gone 2 years. Cole, 2 years of waiting, of not knowing if you were alive or dead. Thomas was kind, attentive. He was married. Yes, that's why I couldn't stay. When I knew about the child, I went to my sister in Philadelphia. Father told everyone I'd died, had a stone carved and everything. Her laugh was bitter. Easier to mourn a dead daughter than acknowledge a ruined one. Lillian watched this play out with a strange detachment, as if she were watching a theater performance. Part of her wanted to rage, to throw this ghost out of her saloon. Part wanted to comfort Cole, who looked like he'd been gut-shot. But mostly she wanted to understand why Sarah was here now. The child? Cole asked. A girl, Hannah. She's 7 now. Sarah pulled a photograph from her bag, handed it across. She has your eyes. Cole studied the picture, and Lillian saw something break in his face. She's not mine. No, but I told her she was. Sarah leaned forward. Thomas died last year, riding accident. His wife never knew about us, but his debts. Cole, I have nothing. I've been taking in washing, sewing, but it's not enough. When I heard about Dutch Garrison, about the reward money, and there it was, the reason for resurrection. You want money. Cole's voice had gone cold. I want help, for Hannah. Sarah's composure cracked. She thinks her father was a war hero who died fighting. It's the only gift I could give her, a father to be proud of instead of ashamed of. So you lied. Like you lied when you became Cole Maddox? Sarah shot back. We all do what we must to survive. Lillian set down her cup with a sharp click. I think, she said carefully, we all need a moment. Sarah, there's a room upstairs you can use tonight. We'll talk more in the morning. Sarah nodded, gathering her dignity. Thank you. I'm sorry. I didn't know he'd remarried. After she went upstairs, Cole and Lillian stood in their saloon, the fire burning low, the weight of unspoken words heavy between them. Say something, Lillian finally prompted. What's there to say? Cole moved to the window, staring out at the snow. My dead wife is alive. Has been all along. Let me mourn her for 8 years while she was raising another man's child. You're angry. I'm? He turned to her, and she saw not anger but devastation. I built my life on her death. Lillian, the drinking, the drifting, the man I became, all because I thought I'd failed her, couldn't protect her from sickness. And it was all a lie. Lillian went to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. Not all of it. Your grief was real. Your loss was real. Was it, can you mourn someone who chose to leave? Yes, she turned him to face her. Because she did die. Cole, the woman you loved, the life you planned that died 8 years ago. What came down those stairs is someone else, a stranger who happens to wear her face. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I don't know what to do. We help her, give her money to start over, for the child's sake. Then she leaves. Lillian pulled back to meet his eyes. Because whatever claim she might have had, she gave up when she let you think she was dead. And if she doesn't want to leave, then she learns what kind of woman marries a gunfighter. That surprised a laugh from him, short but genuine. You'd fight for me. Cole Maddox, I'd burn every saloon from here to Missouri for you. He kissed her then, desperate and grateful, and she tasted salt that might have been tears. When they broke apart, she saw him clearly not the ghost of Cole Madison, but her husband, present and real and hers. Morning brought negotiation. Sarah came down dressed plainly, looking older in daylight. She accepted coffee and eggs with murmured thanks, the three of them circling each other like wary cats. Finally, Cole spoke. How much do you need? I didn't come here just for... How much? Sarah. She named a figure, enough to buy a small house, establish a business, raise a child properly. Less than they had, more than most would give. Done. Cole rose, went to the safe they'd installed after the Dutch incident. He counted out bills, added more. This should see you settled. Sarah stared at the money. Just like that. Just like that. He sat back down. On one condition, Hannah never knows about me. Let her keep her hero father, the dead one. Cole, I mean it. That girl doesn't need the truth. She needs stability, safety, a mother who can provide for her. This gives you that. Sarah's hands shook as she took the money. I loved you once. You know that, don't you? Once. Cole took Lillian's hand. But once is done. They put her on the eastbound train that afternoon. Lillian stood with Cole on the platform, watching the locomotive gather steam. Sarah appeared at a window, raised her hand in farewell or blessing, then was gone in a cloud of smoke and snow. You all right? Lillian asked. I will be. He turned from the tracks, looked at her with clear eyes. She was right about one thing. We do what we must to survive. She survived by leaving. I survived by becoming someone else, but you. What about me? You survived by standing your ground, by fighting for what's yours. He cupped her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. I've been drifting so long, I'd forgotten that was possible. Not drifting anymore. No, not anymore. They walked back through the snow-quiet streets of Cheyenne, past shops closing for the evening, past houses glowing with lamplight and family warmth. The copper flame waited for them, its windows already lit by Dr. Morrison, who'd agreed to watch the bar. Evening, folks. The doctor said, polishing glasses with exaggerated care. Everything settled. Everything settled, Lillian confirmed, hanging up her coat. Thanks for minding things. My pleasure. He studied Cole with physician's eyes. You look better, like a weight's been lifted. Something like that. After Morrison left, they stood in their saloon, in their life, in their truth. The ghost of Sarah Madison had come and gone, leaving clarity in her wake. Cole pulled Lillian close, swaying slightly as if to music only they could hear. Dance with me, he said. There's no music. There's always music. You just have to listen. So they danced in the empty saloon, while snow fell outside and the fire burned within. Danced to the rhythm of their own survival, their own choices, their own love born from ashes and tempered by truth. I love you, Cole said against her hair. Not because I lost someone else, not because you saved me, but because you're Lillian Maddox. Stubborn, brave, terrible coffee-making Lillian Maddox. Sweet talker, she murmured, but her heart was full. Truth-teller, he corrected, spinning her gently. Always. The saloon held them, warm against winter, solid against ghosts. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, customers and suppliers, the daily work of living. But tonight they had this truth acknowledged, past released, future chosen with eyes wide open. In the morning, they would burn Sarah's photograph, letting the last of Cole Madison drift away with the smoke. But tonight they danced, writing their own story in movements of trust and tenderness, proving with each step that some things were stronger than ghosts, deeper than lies, more enduring than the grief that had once defined them. Some things were worth staying for. Some things were home. Spring arrived with a whisper of green across the Wyoming plains, melting the last stubborn patches of snow and filling the air with the promise of new beginnings. 5 years had passed since Dutch garrison fell in the copper flame, 3 since Sarah's ghost had walked through their door, and life had settled into rhythms as comfortable as worn leather. Lillian stood on the porch they'd added to the small ranch house, watching Cole work with the horses in the corral. They'd bought the land 2 years back, 40 acres of good grazing bordered by cottonwoods, close enough to town to run the saloon, but far enough for peace. The morning sun caught the silver threading through his hair, and she smiled at how it made him look distinguished rather than old. Mama, look. The voice belonged to Emma, Their daughter, 3 years old and fearless as a wildcat. She sat atop the fence, balanced precariously, waving a stick like a sword. "Careful, little one," Lillian called, moving closer. "Remember what Papa said about the fence? Papa says I'm brave as a cavalry scout. Brave scouts also know when to be careful." Cole looked up from the horse he was gentling, caught Lillian's eye, and grinned. The smile transformed his face, erasing years of hard living. He'd filled out these past years, good food and better living softening the sharp edges that violence had carved. "Down you come, Scout," he said, plucking Emma from the fence with one arm. "Time for breakfast." They walked back to the house together, Emma chattering about horses and adventures, riding on Cole's shoulders while Lillian's hand rested on her growing belly. The second child would come with the autumn harvest already. They could feel the kicks and turns of new life asserting itself. The kitchen was warm with baking bread and coffee that Cole still teased her about but drank anyway. Through the window, they could see Cheyenne in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys, the railroad depot busy with morning commerce. "Tom Morrison stopped by yesterday," Cole said, settling Emma in her chair. "Says the new schoolmarm is working out well." "Good. Pete would be pleased." They'd named the school after him the Peter Jacobson School for Children. It seemed fitting that the man who died defending the saloon should be remembered for building something instead. His portrait hung in the main classroom, painted from memory by a traveling artist, showing him as Lillian chose to remember him steady, kind, present. "Also said there's talk of statehood again." Cole continued, "Wyoming Territory might become Wyoming State within the year. Imagine that. We'll be state residents instead of territorial citizens. Respectable at last." They shared a smile over Emma's head. Respectability sat strangely on them both, but they wore it like they'd learned to wear peace carefully but with growing comfort. The saloon still operated 3 nights a week, run mostly by hired hands now. Lillian supervised, kept the books, made sure the whiskey wasn't watered and the game stayed honest. But her heart lived here, on this patch of land they'd claimed from the prairie. In this house they'd built board by board. After breakfast, Cole hitched up the wagon for their weekly trip to town. Emma rode between them, singing a song about butterflies that she'd made up on the spot. The road was dry and rutted, spring flowers blooming in the grass beside it, Indian paintbrush and prairie roses, wild as the land itself. Cheyenne had grown in 5 years. New buildings lined the streets, brick replacing wood where fire or time had claimed the originals. The railroad had brought prosperity and civilization in equal measure. There was even talk of electric lights, though most folks thought that was nonsense. The copper flame stood solid on its corner, the new sign freshly painted, inside. Marcus Wheeler, their manager, was already preparing for the evening crowd. Mrs. Maddox, Mr. Maddox," he greeted them. "Little Miss Emma." Marcus. Lillian checked the ledgers while Cole inspected a shipment of whiskey. Emma played quietly with a doll Mrs. Chen had made for her, content in the familiar space. Everything was routine until Judge Blackwood entered, looking older but still sharp as a tack. "Cole, Lillian, glad I caught you both." "Judge," Cole said warily. Good news rarely required judges. "Relax, nothing's wrong." Blackwood accepted the whiskey Lillian poured. "In fact, it's good news. The governor's putting together a list of territorial citations, recognition for citizens who've served Wyoming with distinction." And your names are on it, both of you." He smiled at their surprised faces. "For courage in the face of lawlessness, for contribution to the community's growth. And this is my favorite part, for proving that redemption is possible for anyone willing to fight for it." Lillian felt Cole's hand find hers, squeeze gently. "We just protected what was ours," she said. "Sometimes that's the most courageous thing a person can do." The judge finished his drink, set down the glass. Ceremonies next month in Laramie. Governor himself wants to shake your hands." After he left, they stood in their saloon, the place where they'd met, fought, nearly died, found each other. The bullet holes were still in the ceiling, painted over but visible if you knew where to look. Territorial citations, Cole mused. Sarah would laugh herself sick. "Sarah's gone," Lillian reminded him gently. "We're here." "Yes, we are." They closed early that day, loading Emma and supplies into the wagon as the sun peeked overhead. The ride home was quiet, each lost in thought. Emma had fallen asleep against Cole's shoulder, trusting as only children could be. "You know what I realized," Lillian said as their ranch came into view. "What's that?" "We made it. Really made it." She gestured at the land, the house, their sleeping daughter, her rounded belly. "This life we built from nothing but stubbornness and spit. It's real." "Real as that first kiss in the rain," Cole agreed. "Real as Dutch's bullets. Real as every sunrise since." They pulled up to the house as afternoon shadows grew long. Cole carried Emma inside while Lillian unhitched the horses, a chore she insisted on despite her condition. The animals knew her touch, whickering softly as she worked. Inside, she found Cole in Emma's room, tucking her in for a nap. He moved with the careful grace of a man who'd learned gentleness late, but treasured it all the more for that. Watching them, Lillian felt her heart swell with a love so fierce it sometimes frightened her. "I'd burn every saloon from here to California for you two," she whispered. Cole looked up, smiled. "I know, but you don't have to. We're safe. Promise." Promise. That evening, as spring settled over Wyoming territory like a blessing, they sat on their porch watching the stars emerge. Emma played at their feet, chattering to her doll about horses and adventures. Inside Lillian, new life turned and kicked, eager to join this family built from ashes and hope. "I've been thinking," Cole said, "about what the judge said. Redemption. What about it? Maybe that's what this all was, not just the gunfight or surviving Dutch, everything after." He pulled her close, hand resting on her belly. "Maybe redemption isn't one big moment. Maybe it's all the small ones choosing to stay, choosing to build, choosing to love even when you've forgotten how, choosing to make terrible coffee every morning. That too," he kissed her temple. "Especially that." The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and indifferent, but on their little patch of Wyoming earth, Cole and Lillian Maddox had carved out something precious. Not just survival, but a life. Not just peace, but joy. Not just love, but family. "Come on," Lillian said finally, standing with effort. "Let's get our daughter inside before the dew falls." They gathered Emma, drowsy and protesting, and went into their house. Cole lit the lamps while Lillian prepared supper, moving in the easy harmony of long partnership. Through the window, the lights of Cheyenne glowed in the distance, and somewhere a coyote called to the rising moon. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges: ranch work, saloon business, the daily effort of living. Next month they'd stand before the governor, receive medals they'd never sought, be recognized as the respectable citizens they'd somehow become. But tonight, in their kitchen filled with lamplight and laughter, they were simply the Maddox family. A gunfighter who'd found peace, a saloon owner who'd found home, a little girl who'd never know hunger or fear, and soon, another child to carry their story forward into whatever future Wyoming held. "I love you," Cole said suddenly, apropos of nothing. "I love you too," Lillian replied, not looking up from the stove. "Even if you did track mud all through my clean kitchen." Our kitchen, she agreed, and smiled. Outside, the prairie wind sang its ancient song, and the copper flame stood empty but waiting, ready to serve whiskey and shelter to any soul who needed it. It had been witness to their beginning, and though they visited it less now, It remained part of their story, a reminder that sometimes the most unlikely places could birth the most enduring loves. In the morning, they would rise with the sun, tend their animals, raise their children, and continue building the life they'd fought so hard to claim. But for now, they were together. They were whole. And they were home. And in Wyoming territory, on the edge of civilization, in a house built by their own hands, that was miracle enough. "Mama," Emma said sleepily, "tell the story about Papa and the bad men." "Tomorrow, little one," Lillian promised. "Tomorrow I'll tell you how the bravest man in Wyoming saved our saloon." "And fell in love," Cole added, catching Lillian's eye. "And fell in love." She agreed. "The very best part." Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope you enjoyed following Cole and Lillian's journey from that first meeting in the Copper Flame to their hard-won happiness on the Wyoming prairie. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss your thoughts about their story. If you enjoyed this tale of redemption and romance in the Old West, please subscribe to my channel Wild West Stories 1850 and hit that like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more listeners discover this story of love blooming in the harsh frontier. Until our next adventure in the Wild West, partners,